And love, everybody. I had a conversation with a friend of mine about a book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, who is the author of Think and Grow Rich. It's a book that was written in like the 1920s, and it tackles the subject of the devil. It's a book written in interview style from an author who says that they are interviewing a physical manifestation of the devil, and goes through the different tactics that the devil uses to do its bidding, right? And our conversation wasn't necessarily centered around outwitting the devil. It was about self-help books that are written by non-black authors. How do we feel about them? Do we connect with them? Is some of the information written in a culturally impactful way to where black readers can resonate and relate to a lot of the topics? So I wanted to ask you all, like, how do you feel about self-help books that are written by authors that are not black? Do you take the necessary information from these books? Do you connect with them? How do you feel about them? Which ones have you read that you liked? Which one did you read that you didn't too much care for? So I want to ask you all how you felt about it. Now, I'll tell you my stance. I haven't read that much in the self-help genre, to be honest with you. I've read from the self-help genre from authors that are not black, I'll say. I've read a few of them. I have not read many. And the reason for that is I do not connect with some of them. Some of these self-help books that I've read from authors that are not black completely disregard things like racism, a systemic racism in this country and in this world. A lot of the self-help books that I've read, I can only say the ones that I've read from authors that are not black, center around just positive thinking. If you think positive enough, great things will happen for you. If you don't think positive enough, you deserve the bad things that happen. And referencing Outwitting the Devil again, he does step into that realm on some of the chapters of the book. I remember one part of the book, he basically says people that are in poverty are there because they deserve to be. And I think that is written from a privileged standpoint of a white man who's never had to worry about, a systemic racism problem. A white man that has been told since birth that he can get anything that he wants, and it's been proven that he can get anything he wants because he's living in America at any time. Even though he's living in the 1920s, that outlook completely disregards the struggle that people that look like me have to go through in order to pull ourselves out of a poverty situation or a underemployment situation or anything like that. So when I read that part, I'll admit it raised my eyebrows because I'm like, he's writing this from a place of absolute privilege that I can't relate to, right? So that's one of my biggest gripes with self-help books that are written by authors that don't look like me, is that if you can disregard a complete, systemic racism problem and just think positive and things will work out. You're saying that from a place of privilege and a place that I don't relate to because it disregards the struggles that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that's just kind of my outlook on it. And then while I got you here, while we're talking, I'll talk about the book Outwitting the Devil a little bit. The premise of the book is from the Hellenistic era of Egyptian philosophy, that we are all God and the devil in one, depending on our thought patterns and our outlook, and that thinking negatively is putting us in a personal hell. And so when I read the book, it immediately just kind of brought up feelings of, I would have appreciated this book was written by a black author, since this is knowledge from a black standpoint, right? So reading that book somewhat led me to like the feelings of when they burned down the library in Egypt and then laid claim to all of that information and all that knowledge. Napoleon Hill was deemed as a genius after he wrote the book, after he published Outwitting the Devil and Think and Grow Rich. He was looked at as groundbreaking and a philosopher and a deep thinker. And a lot of the information was straight out I'm not going to say stolen because I'm not going to say he stole it, but it was all borrowed from an Egyptian philosophy that people that look like me had for centuries before the book came out. So, like I said, it's a well written book, but it still brings up those feelings to me of a time when our information was stolen and profited from without us being able to have a penny of the reward from it. So, reading it did remind me of that. Like I said, I wouldn't tell people not to read the book. That's just my outlook on the premise of the book. The book is well written. I'll just say on the premise of the book, that's how I feel.